got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the show. I'm your host, Dano Hamilton. You guys can call me Dano, or Daniel, whatever you guys want to call me. But hey, you guys, thank you so much for popping on the show tonight and checking it out. You guys, I got a really great guest tonight. And before I introduce him, I just want to say thank you for all the support you've shown the channel. Continue to grow. And we're pretty close to my June goal. My June goal is to hit 3,000 subscribers. So if you come across this channel and you like what you see, please consider giving us a sub. Don't forget to hit that bell to get those notifications, like and comment, and share. If you guys have had an encounter of some kind and you'd like to come on the show, please shoot me an email at thecryptidpodcast72@gmail.com. Again, thecryptidpodcast72 gmail.com. Now, our guest tonight is a fellow podcaster, and he is the co-host of DAX Machina. And ladies and gentlemen, let's bring on Mr. Robby Raines. Robbie, what's up, buddy?
Not much, man. What's going on?
You know, same old. Had to drive like an hour and 25 minutes through construction and rain and just to get here and grab a quick bite to eat, hang out with my wife and daughter for a few moments, and then come down here and do what I like to do the best. And that's sit down and talk with like-minded individuals about some of their encounters, and just learn new things. So how about you? How was your day?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Normal day at work. Got to hold a 14-foot reticulated python. Just a normal work day.
So you work with snakes?
No. I'm a police officer, but I'm a SRO at an elementary school, and we've got summer camp going on right now. Summer reading camp. So Fridays are their field trip days. But this year, they instead of going to the field trips, they're bringing the field trips to the school. So today was Scaly Adventures, and they brought in a bunch of snakes. So I got to hold a 14-foot python. So kids thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's not my thing. So you've had quite an extensive history with these cryptids, Bigfoot, dogmen. And before we get into your encounters, let me ask you this: what was it that kind of put you on this path that led you on this journey? And from what I'm looking at, we're looking like 40+ year journey.
Yeah, because I'll be 51 in a few months. So yeah, it's been probably about because I think I was 8 or 9 when I had that first encounter back in the 80s, that's what, to answer your question, that's what put me on this journey. Because after I had that encounter, back then we didn't have the internet, you couldn't just come in and type up on the Googles, as me and DA like to say, and look at this stuff. You had to read. You had to, every once in a while you got to watch In Search Of when it came on Leonard Nimoy, or the old $6 Million Man, Colonel Steve Rogers, with Andre the Giant and Richard Creel from the James Bond movies playing Bigfoot in 2 separate episodes. But that was really the only thing you had. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of movies like there are now. Now you can get on Tubi or anything like that, and you can see 5 million Bigfoot and Dogman / werewolf or any of those kind of movies. Back then you had The Legend of Boggy Creek, and that was about it. I mean, so you have to start reading. So I started reading anything that I could read about them, which even then you really couldn't find a whole lot of books about it because it was one of them taboo topics.
One book in my school, it was one book. I knew where it was, and I checked that book out. No one got to check that book out if I got to it first. If I got to it first, I checked it out, turned it in, rechecked it out, turned it in. I had it for the entire school year. So,
yeah. But that's the thing. You didn't have a whole lot of resources back then like you do now. So I got as much and absorbed as much as I could, but then it just came to a point, where, you get tired of people making fun of you and things like that. And, oh, you're crazy. You didn't see what you saw, or there's all this. So you just kind of start packing it in. And I packed it in for a while, but I still read everything. I just didn't talk about it. And really, I didn't really get back into it until I read one of DA's books. And there was one line in that book. I read it, and it basically it opened the door, screwed the cap off, whatever analogy you want to use. He had a line, and it was the first Wild Hunt book. Was the first Odin's Call was the first one of his that I read, and it was a line in there where it was talking about he was tree peaking, and it talked about it doing the swaying motion. And when I read that, it brought back that whole entire scene, because I remember that thing swaying back and forth in front of that storm door, and it just flooded that emotion. It just I relived the whole thing, and it's the first time I'd really thought about it or talked about it in 40 plus years. So, I sent DA an email, and 1 turned into 2, turned into 10, turned into 20. Doc and I became best friends. I eventually became one of his co-hosts, and me, him, and Doc have been out in the woods together. And it's just, that reading that one line in that one book has kind of changed my life. I know there's a lot of cliches people talk about it, but it did. Reading that, if I had never read that book, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love DA. He's a great person. He's super interesting, very knowledgeable, and I'm guilty of not reading some of his books. So that's definitely on. I made a list of things I'd like for Father's Day, Christmas, and my birthday. So hopefully my wife and kids.
Yeah, and that's another thing about him. He's been on me since we've been friends, because I had a book idea in my head for 30 plus years and never did it. Now I've got 2 published books and about to publish my 3rd. So he's good for the soul. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I'm working on. I've got 2 books that I'm working on, and I just recently started writing on one of them again. So one's a nonfiction and one's a fiction. So, but hey, let's go ahead and get in and talk about your first encounter. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the camera on you and just let you roll with it. I'll be off camera. My mic's gonna be muted, and I'm just gonna be taking notes. And then after, I'll ask some questions.
All right.
All right. So take it away, Robbie.
So my first encounter happened really not more than 20, 30 yards from where I'm sitting right now. I mean, give or take, across the road. My great grandfather used to own all this land. It's down to about 3, 4, maybe 5 acres between me, my mom and stepdad, and my uncle were the last of the family that owns any land around here. But back then, he owned at one time 180 something acres. And at this time, it was probably maybe around the 60, 70 acre mark. He'd already sold off a good bunch of it, because he was on up there by the time I was born. He was probably in his early 80s at the time. So, but there was still a good bit of farmland over there across the road where this happened. And, back then, if anybody's, close to my age, or, 40s, late 40s, early 50s, back then you sat around on the front porch and talked, had the old yellow light bulb. And that's what people did back then. Well, while my mom, my grandmother and grandfather, her mom and dad, and my 2 great grandparents, which was my grandmother's parents, they were all sitting out on the front porch talking. I was sitting, it was probably like a Friday night or something like that. But I was sitting in the den probably watching the Dukes of Hazzard, because if it was Friday night and I was down there watching TV, that's probably what I was watching. Anyway, when the show ended, I got up, went to turn the TV off, and back in those days, and people have argued and said this and said, but back in those days, if you built your own house, you didn't have a whole lot of money, you didn't bring in a construction crew when you built these things yourself. If the ground was not level, you didn't bring in bulldozers and backhoes and things like that to level it out. You stacked block up to where the house was it was level. So you may have a run of 1 block on one side and a run of 5 block on the other side. And it was 5 block high on this side and 2 blocks or 1 or 2 blocks high on the other side. That's just how you leveled it out. So on the side of the house the kitchen was on, it was about 5 blocks high, maybe, give or take. So the back porch was pretty high up off the ground. The floor was probably 4.5 to 5 feet off the ground. Had those old cement steps that led up to the back door, and one of those old storm doors. It was we called it the back porch, but it's basically like a little mud room. That's where the water heater was. That's where Pop always sat and took his boots off when he come in from working the field. Kept his muddy boots and everything out there. Kept his coats and hats and all that kind of stuff out there. Anyway, so where I was at was in the den where the wood stove that heated the house was in there. My grandmother or my great grandmother, she wore those orthopedic braces and orthopedic shoes, so she had to sleep in one of those specialty hospital beds that would adjust so she could actually sleep at night. So her bed was in that room, and the TV was in there, and then directly to the right of that room was the kitchen. So when I stood up to turn the TV off, the only room the only light inside the house was the light that was in the den. So when I stood up to turn the TV off, for whatever reason, I looked to my right, looking through the kitchen and looking out into that little mud room. And like I've told people to this day, I have no idea why I looked, because straight ahead was where my mom and my grandparents and my great grandparents were. They were out on the front porch. You had to go through the little front room and out on the front porch. For some reason, I looked through the kitchen, looked out on that back in that mud room, and was looking out that screen door. And this face started coming into focus, because I was like, what am I looking at? And this conical shaped head started coming to view. I don't know what color the fur was, because it was obviously, I said, the only light that was on was over my head. So I'm not going to be able to see that far or see that much color detail that far away. But I could tell it didn't have any, like around the eyes and the nose and the lip area. There was no hair or fur, whatever you want to call it. But it was a dark color fur. And it, like I said, a conical shaped head. And remember back when the bottom of the floor was probably about 5 feet off the ground. So this thing's chest was like middle of that little center strip of the door. And it had to hunch down, and I could still only see about from here down. The rest of the top of its head was above the door. So I'm sitting there looking at it, and while I'm looking at it, it starts doing this side to side motion, just like it's just sitting there watching me. And I'm like, I still had not registered with me. And thinking back about it, you think, oh, this took like 5-10 minutes to happen. In reality, it's probably like 20-30 seconds. And then the word monster just formed in my head. Because like I said, back then, you didn't have a whole lot of the internet and things like that to go by. So Bigfoot was not a really popular subject like it is now. And so while I may have known what the term was, I wasn't, like nowadays you would see something like that and automatically you would think Bigfoot. Back then, that's not a term that most people were as familiar with as they are now. So I saw it once that word kicked in, and then the fight or flight syndrome kicked in. I take off and go outside on the front porch with my mom, and I'm like, you got to call Dad, call Dad, call Dad. Of course, it was as old as I was. It was probably call Daddy, call Daddy. My stepdad worked for the sheriff's office in the county that we live in. And back then there was no cell phones. There was no pagers. There was none of that stuff. So for her to get him here or over there, she would have to call dispatch. Dispatch would have to call him on the radio. He'd have to go drive somewhere where there was a phone, and then he would have to make the phone call and find out what's going on. Then wherever he was in the county, he would have to drive back to the house. So I said, if you can't get Dad, call Uncle Brian. I want one of them down here. My uncle was just my mom's baby brother, and he played football. And in my eyes, in my mind, nobody could mess with my dad or my uncle. So long story short, my dad was on his way, but it was probably going to take him 30 minutes to get there, I think is what they said. So my uncle, who just lived up the road, he comes down. He's 6'5", 350, 360 pounds, played football. He goes out and stands on the back porch. They turn the light on. He said, see, you was just seeing things and all this stuff. And I'm like, Uncle Brian, its head was like 2.5 feet above, 2.5, 3 feet above where yours is at. And he was standing on the steps. So they never, my stepdad now believes me because he started really kind of looking into it as from the standpoint of being a police officer and start looking at it and thinking, his story never changed in 40 years. He may have remembered a detail that he didn't remember the first time, but his story never changed in 40 years. And that's the big thing, that he had approached it was more like an investigative standpoint because he was the end of his career. He was an investigator and he was a pretty good one. So he's like, there's no deceit and he had plenty of experience with me being deceitful about school and things like that. So he had a pretty good base to judge it against, or a pretty good, sample group of what I acted like when I wasn't telling the truth. And he said, your story never changed. He said, fundamentally, your story was exactly the same from start to finish for 40 plus years. He said that if somebody who's being deceitful just doesn't do things like that or doesn't keep telling the same story, big things will change and the story will change completely. And, being a cop for, almost 30 years myself, he's right. You can't continue to tell a fabricated story the exact same way for that many years. It just, most people have a trouble telling it the same way within 10 minutes of telling you the story. They tell you a story 10 minutes later, if they're lying, then, the story changes completely. Anyway, so I can remember my great grandmother I used to love to go out and play in the woods, and she used to tell me or say things like, don't you go too far in the woods or the boogers will get you. I didn't know what, I thought she was just talking about either, a crazy guy or some type of monster or something. I didn't know what I know now, which is that's a colloquial term, that a lot of people call Bigfoot boogers. Well, I'm thinking that my great grandparents probably knew something because they never, that I can remember, ever told me that they didn't believe me. Now my grandparents and my mom, my stepdad are all, oh, well, you just saw this or you just saw that, or it was your imagination, things like that. But my great grandparents never said that they didn't believe me. My real dad was always like, I don't know what you saw, son, but I believe that you saw something. So that's the story of my first encounter. That's probably what put me on this path.
Yeah, and you said you were about 9 years old when that happened?
8 or 9. It was in the early 80s. So I was 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah, see, you're not much younger than I am. I'm 53, so. But
yeah, I'll be 51 in a couple months.
Dude, I just can't imagine, seeing something like that. Here you are, just get done watching, and you're probably right, either A-Team or Dukes of Hazzard, and shutting the TV off, and you happen just to look out the back, and this thing came up on the back porch.
I don't think it was on the back porch. I think it was standing beside it. I think that's how tall it was. I think because DA and I've talked about it, and he said, well, how tall do you think it was? And I said, it had to be at least 9.5 to 10 feet tall, probably more than that. I'm going to say conservatively that, but realistically, I'm thinking this thing was probably closer to 11 to 12 feet because, and I'm giving that big of a leeway because that house was gone or not gone, but it's been resold and rebuilt. So it's hard for me to remember exactly if that floor was 5 feet off the ground. An 8 or 9 year old, 5 feet is going to look different. So that's why I say conservatively, it was easily over 9 feet. We'll put it that way. But I believe it was closer to 12 feet.
That's a big boy. So let me ask you. So after that encounter, the next day, did you or anybody in your family look
Well,
around the back area to see if there were any prints or?
now my stepdad did go down because he was on second shift. So when he got up, they went down there. But where the house was in that area was there was no grass. It was just really hard packed red clay.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, as they told me, no prints because they didn't take me. But this is something DA and I have come or talked about later, and a theory that we come up with was they found something, because I can remember maybe the next weekend after this, my dad, my uncle, my grandpa, and my great grandpa said, "Oh, we got to go down in the back pasture and check out some areas in the swamp down there because somebody said there was a bear down there." So DA and I theorized that they found something around the house that led them to believe, okay, well, maybe they didn't believe it was a Bigfoot, but maybe they did think that I saw a bear standing up or something. So they went down there to check and see if there was any sign of a bear or anything like that. So they did go down in that back pasture to check on something a week or so after I had my sighting. So I think they might have found something. Nobody has ever told, even my stepdad now, who believes me. I don't know if it was something that he just doesn't remember, or if it was something that they weren't supposed to say. To this day, he's like, "Oh, well, I remember us going down there, but I don't remember if other than your pa said that there was a bear down there, and we went down to check and see." So I still think they must have found something that at least lent some credence to what I had said.
Yeah. So how many people were living in the home at that time?
It's just my great grandmother and great grandfather.
Okay.
But where that house was, walked right across the road, and that was my grandparents' house. And then across the road and up the driveway is where me, my mom, my dad, my stepdad, and my little brother lived. And then my uncle lived behind us. So it was all family land.
Yeah.
My grandmother's youngest brother lived on down the road a little ways. So there was hardly anybody around that area at that time that wasn't family.
Yeah. Man, I love hearing aspects of stories like that. It's all family because, my mom was from West Virginia, and when we lived in West Virginia, it was me, my mom, my little brother, my aunt, my uncle, my 5 cousins, my great grandma, and then just down the road was my grandma and grandpa. So that's such a close knit, family unit. It's just, you had like 5 generations living around there. That's just, I love hearing things like that. And your great grandma saying, better watch out for them boogers. Yeah, my great grandma would say the same things. We'd hear things out in the woods, out behind the house, way up in the woods, and you know, Nanny, what was that? Oh, it's just them hillbillies up there. So boogers, just be careful because those boogers will get you.
Yeah, that's what she would. I can distinctly remember her saying that multiple times
Mhm.
because I love to go out and play in the woods. Don't you go out in them woods too far, Robbie. Them boogers will get you.
Yep.
And like I said, back then you don't have the internet to understand these terms. I don't think I knew that was a term for Bigfoot until maybe a couple of years ago.
Yeah, me neither. Me
So,
neither. So
and that's and DA and I started talking about that and I think it's actually when we started being friends with Greg and Spencer and Misty from the Woodwalkers, because they use that term a lot, and I was like, I've heard that somewhere before, but I can't remember. I can't place where I've heard that for. We got to talking, and as we get to talking, it just come back to me. I'm like, wait a minute, that's what my great grandmother used to tell me about going out in the woods. And he's like, great grandmother from the house where you had your encounter. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, dude, I bet she knew something.
Yep.
And I'm like,
there's things that I remember my great grandmother always saying. She'd tell us boys, go out there in that creek, get me some turtles. Meaning she wanted some snapping turtles so she could make some turtle soup. If we were cutting up, go pick me a switch. And watch out for them boogers.
Had to pick my own hickory plenty of times.
Ooh, boy, I tell you. But so that's what I was getting at, asking about the whole dynamics of the families. Did you ever recall hearing anything knocking on your house, or being over your grandparents' or great-grandparents' house, hearing something knocking on the house, or hearing some type of holler or an owl, but you'd really know it wasn't an owl or anything like that?
Well, but there again, with the time frame, that was not something that was prevalent that people just knew. Okay, there's these things, because there was no community that talks about it like there is now. Now
Mhm.
that's a common thing. So I'm sure that because I know I heard owls. I knew. Now, as far as anything smacking the side of the house, I don't ever remember that.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that it didn't. It may have happened because I didn't spend the night with my great grandparents a whole lot, because they, like I said, they were older at that point. So it may have happened, and it happened when I wasn't there, or I just don't remember it. But as far as hearing the owls and things like that, I know I heard that kind of stuff, but probably at that point I was just thinking, oh, that's just a weird sounding owl,
Yeah.
because that was not such a common thing that people were. It was probably a common thing. It just was not a well known thing like it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, I get it. So why don't you take us into another one of your encounters? So this happened in the 80s. Did anything happen, like, after the 80s, maybe 90s, early 2000s?
Oh, well, after, and this is we've talked about this all the time. And you ever got a new car, and you get that new car, and it seems like every other car that you see on the road at that point, you hadn't seen that car, didn't pay attention to it, but you get that car, and it seems like every other car you see on the road is, there goes my car.
Yep, exactly.
Same thing. It's because your mind is looking for that now, and I think once you have that paradigm shift, and you know what to look for, and you're open to that, and you're not that you have an encounter and you're like, I don't know what that was. But if you have the encounter and you know what it was, and you accept it, and you believe that it's possible, because people have encounters all the time, and you hear them, and they're like, I don't know what I saw. To me, that's not the paradigm shift. The paradigm shift is when you have those encounters, and you're like, okay, these things are real. That was Bigfoot, or that was a dog man. And once that paradigm shift happens, and you go out in the woods, and you're more susceptible to what you're supposed to be looking for, and the things that are different and all that, things start happening. So, like I said, it's not like I went out looking for this stuff after that happened. So the first time that I ever went out looking for Bigfoot after that happened, me, my stepdad, my son, and my stepdad's youngest brother all went up to Jones Gap.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have any visual, but we heard a lot of vocalization type stuff. My dad said that my dad and my son were walking in front of me and his brother, my uncle, and they were probably about 15, 20 yards ahead of us. And Dad stopped, and he said, he gave us the be quiet sign. So me and my Uncle Scott kind of moved up beside him, and I whispered, I said, what is it, Dad? And he said, I hear something. It's like, yeah, we knew there was nobody in front of us on the trail, because when we got there was no other cars in the parking lot. So we get all the way up the trail. We know we're up there pretty much by ourselves. But he said, I hear somebody talking in front of us, but
Really?
I can't. It's like, it was like he heard something making a sound, and it to his brain, it was like, that sounds like a language, that sounds like a vocalization, but my brain can't pick up what it's saying. So I knowing what I know now, I think he was hearing samurai chatter, or Ghibli, or whatever you want to call it, but more commonly the samurai chatter is what he was hearing.
Okay. Was it something like this?
I never heard it, so I couldn't tell you,
Okay.
because he was ahead of us, so I didn't hear it. So he would be the one to have to tell you if it was what it sounded like.
Yeah.
But he said, we got to talking, and my Uncle Scott's really into it too. And he was like, well, he said, he looked at me and said, Robbie, me and you, because where we were at, it was like this big, we were walking along the trail, and it was like a big rock cliff that went way, way up above us, probably 40 or 50 feet above the trail. So he and I kind of eased our way up and kind of backed up and just kind of squatted down at the base of this little cliff. And my dad and my son kept on walking. So we're like, you know, a lot of times if, I'm sure you've probably heard this too, somebody keeps on walking, they might start moving back in a different direction, you know, to kind of get away from them. So that was our whole thing, is that, okay, if me and my Uncle Scott kind of stay right here, maybe we'll see something. Maybe they'll move, maybe whatever. Well, apparently whatever it was, they knew where we were at, because my dad and my son move on down the trail, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden things start hitting the ground in front of us. Now there's no trees behind us other than way up on top of the mountain, but it wasn't falling straight down. It was like arcing and coming down and hitting the ground like 15 feet in front of us. And we sat there for probably another 5-10 minutes, and, you know, like 10-15 of those things hit the ground in front of us. So finally my dad and my son worked their way back around, and we're like, they didn't follow y'all, and they stayed up there above us. So we were telling them what happened. My dad was like, okay, these things are pretty smart. And there again, that was before it really became popular on TV, because my son was probably 10 when we went out there, and he's 25 now. So
yeah,
that was a pretty good while ago. Then after, it really didn't do a whole lot, because, you know, working the road and being a police officer, you kind of don't want to get that stigma.
Yep.
You know, you don't want people to, and, you know, so I just kind of, there again, just kind of put, it was always there, but I kind of put it to the back burner. And then once kids moved out, once I got to the point where I'm getting close to retirement, I just got to, okay, you know, I don't care anymore. If people know that I believe in this, it is what it is. I don't care. So I started kind of getting back into it. Read DA's book. He and I became friends. Got to be on his podcast. Then ended up being his co-host. Met some amazing people. Jessica Jones.
Yeah,
Woodwalkers.
I'm still hoping to get Jessica on the show and the Woodwalkers on the show, and those are some really, really. I love the attention to detail that they bring. The information, you know, I can't say enough good things about them.
Oh yeah, so. Jessica and I have been in a couple of hairy situations out in the North Georgia woods. But Jessica's awesome. I love Jessica to death. She's one of my closest friends. Got to hang out with Greg and Misty and Spencer in the LBL.
Nice.
And that was a pretty good experience. You know, it's been a roller coaster of it. You know, obviously there's been some people that I wish I hadn't met, but there's been way more people that I'm glad I met.
Yeah.
You know, I was never the guy that liked to go and take a lot of vacation or do a lot of, you know, I'm not saying I was a homebody, but I was not a traveling person. But ever since I've got back in this, I've gone to Missouri like 5-6 times. I've gone to Texas. I've gone to Ohio. I've gone to Arkansas. I've gone to Texas. I got to go and meet, I think it's Kevin Crawford or Ken Crawford. I can't remember what his first name is, but the guy who played the creature in the Legend of Boggy Creek. I actually got to meet that guy. Yeah. William Lunsford, who's, I don't know if you know him, but William Lunsford's probably one of the foremost people that knows the most about the Falk monster. He's taken God knows how many castings from that area. Got to go meet him, and he introduced us to Mr. Crawford, who played the monster in the movie. He was in the Marines at the time, and he was out on leave, and he actually played. That was some of his family. The Crabtrees are some of his family.
Yeah.
And so got to meet him. I got to go out walk Sulphur River bottoms and at night looking. It's just, I mean, just bucket list things. Because Legend of Boggy Creek, I saw that after I had my encounter. It came out before that, but I never saw it until after my encounter.
Yeah, same here.
And just to see that movie, and I've seen it as many times as I've seen it, and because that's kind of like, that's our movie for us researchers and ones of us who go out and look for this thing. I mean, that's kind of the go-to movie.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to go into that area, I got to go see the Monster Mart before it got sold, and before Mr. Robert sold it and all. I got to meet him. It's just, I've met so many great people and got to do so many things that I never thought I would get to do. And really, honestly, it goes back to that, like I said, that reading that one line in DA's book. If I hadn't read his book, none of this would have happened.
Yeah. So let's kind of fast forward. And let me ask you this. Were you with Wyatt and Richard and DA when Richard boated, brought a group of guys out on a boat?
Yeah.
Were you with that group?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that entire trip?
Yeah. Yeah. There was Doc was actually supposed to be with us that night, or that trip, but he had something happen. I think he had a couple guys that canceled on him that couldn't teach classes, so he had to end up staying at home or not staying at home. He had to go to a couple of classes. So there was 7 of us. There was me, DA, his son Noah, Lieutenant Estrella, and Lieutenant Jenkins, 2 of DA's old lieutenants from when he was in law enforcement. Wyatt and Steve Monrodis, another one of our other co-hosts from the show. And I can't remember the name of the boat landing that we put in from, but we put in, and they were originally trying to find us a pontoon, but we couldn't find a pontoon, or they couldn't find a pontoon, so we had to go in Richard's bass boat. So he was like, "Okay, well, I can take 3 at a time, me and 3 others." So first 3 over, me, DA, and Noah, and it's about a 10-minute boat ride over there, and about 5-ish, maybe a little bit more back, because obviously the boat's not loaded down going back. But it's still, you got another 10 minutes once he loaded everybody up. So me, DA, and Noah were on that peninsula, pitch black, for probably, I'd say, close to 20 minutes. And it got kind of hairy there at first. When we started hearing little twigs snap, and we were hearing rocks skittering all over the place like they were being thrown at us. So everybody gets there finally. We group up. DA gives a little safety brief. Okay, Robbie's tracking. I think Noah was doing the parabolic mic. Steve was the medic, obviously, because he's a nurse. I think Estrella was doing photographs, and just giving everybody the assignments so everybody knew what to do. If we get separated, don't start moving around. Just stay where you're at. Just the whole thing. I know if you've done that kind of stuff, Daniel, you know what I'm talking about. So we start walking, and as soon as we started walking and looking, we started hearing stuff again, and it was more of like in a curious nature. Nothing seemed to be like overly aggressive at that point. We were finding partial tracks. We found a track inside or underneath a water or in a water puddle. And when I say puddle, I say puddle. I should say it was probably about 5 by 10 long. It was just a big depression in the ground and filled up with rainwater. We found an impression or a track underneath that. Kept on walking. Noah and I both were in the back at first, and I had a psionics, which is not technically night vision, but it's definitely a low light vision. You can almost see as good as daytime in it, but it just doesn't work on the same principles as night vision. But Noah was on the parabolic, and I was kind of looking around with that. But I was having to put that monocular up to my eye, and with my whichever one it is where you can't see things that are real close like glasses, I couldn't see with my lenses because I just got these glasses, and I couldn't get it close enough to focus with the glasses on, but I could, if I pulled it away, it was too small and I couldn't see it. So I switched with Noah, and I got on the parabolic, and he got on the psionics. Well, when he got on psionics, he could see something moving, but it had moved in the bushes in the time it took us to swap everything around, him to figure out everything. It moved back in the bushes, and that's pretty much all he saw was just a shape moving into the bushes. Well, we decided, okay, let's get on around with everybody else. So we get back, catch up to the group. Well, Noah goes up there to kind of tell DA what was going on, and I hung at the back with not Richard, because Richard was out in the boat, kind of circling the peninsula, just waiting for us to call him because we all had the two-way radios. So I stay at the back with Wyatt, and he and I are just kind of sitting there talking, and he's on my left, so I'm looking to my left talking to him. And as we were doing the light discipline thing, so we didn't have our headlights on or anything. As I look over at Wyatt and I'm sitting there talking to him, I see, you can see the shape of the trees going by, but you couldn't really see the trees. You can just see the shape of them. And I saw the tree, but I saw something on the tree that just didn't look like it belonged. It's hard to explain if you don't or haven't experienced it, but it just, sometimes you see things that just doesn't look like it's supposed to be there. And so I stopped him. I said, "Hold on a second, Wyatt." I said, "Cover your eyes. I'm gonna turn my light on." And I reached up to turn my light on, and when I turned my light on, we both were like, because there's a deer hide hanging on the tree, and the tree was about that big around. Because most people, first thing you say when it's, oh, well, it was a mountain lion. Yeah, it was about 6.5 to 7 feet off the ground, and it was hanging over two limbs on a tree about that big around. It was the middle of July, hot as all get out, and the blood that was on the tree and on the ground was still red. Doc said that blood should already oxidized at that point. So whatever it was fairly fresh. The Steve, being a nurse, after he described it, he said that was mechanically separated, which basically meant that it was twisted and snapped. It wasn't cut. There was no clean marks to it. It was spun and snapped at the foreleg. Like this part of the leg up was there and everything else was gone. And there was still sinew and stuff hanging out of the hide. There was fur all over the ground right in front of it. Still blood on the ground, blood on the tree. It was like, okay, well, being the way we are, okay, well, what could have done this? Trying to debunk it, trying to figure out the most logical thing. Okay, what do we got here in Missouri that can do this? Okay, cougars, obviously. Well, cougar's not going to be a big, 150-pound cat's not going to be able to climb that little tree. And a small cat's not going to do that to, if it was a younger cat, it's not going to be able to do that kind of damage to a deer. So, okay, that's out. Wolves. Okay, it's way too high for any wolf we got around here. Then bear. Okay, it's high enough for a black bear to do it, but if bear's got it in its mouth, how's it going to hang it on one limb on this side and the other limb on this? They're kind of like opposite from each other. With that motion, I mean, that's about the only way that could have got up there. Somebody put it up there. Okay, we've been on this, at this point, we'd been on this little peninsula for probably close to an hour and a half the time we found this. There was nobody else out there because we got on there probably 11:40-ish. So this was after midnight. I don't think there was anybody else out there with us. It was just out there to mess with us. So, we take pictures of that. We talk about it. We're all excited about this stuff. When we get back on the trail, this is on the left side. We walk about 13 yards, and somebody looks on the right side, and there's a little sapling that's about that big around. It's got a little fork in it. There's a fish head stuck in the fork of that sapling. Not a clean cut fish head. It's like it'd been either pulled off or bitten off and stuck in that tree. I think that was a territorial marking, because after we got past that, that's when we started really hearing. Noah heard samurai chatter on the parabolic. There were a lot more things getting thrown, a lot more twigs and branches getting snapped, and we heard stuff moving. We heard grunts. Never saw any eye shine at that point, and we didn't realize it at this particular point, and Steve didn't even realize it, but when he had jumped off the boat, he had landed wrong, and he ended up like actually breaking his leg. So the whole time we were out there, Steve was walking around on a broken leg. So we get to the middle of this after we find all that stuff. Or let me back up after we find the fish head, and we start moving a little bit more. And this is like a campsite on Table Rock Lake in Missouri that it's a peninsula, but they have bulldozed the only drive-through entrance. They have bulldozed huge piles of dirt and rocks and everything up there. So you couldn't even drive a four-wheeler, or you'd have to have a rock climbing rig to get over some of the stuff that they put out there. Well, after we passed the fish head, we'd seen pieces of the concrete picnic tables kind of messed up and laying all over places. Well, we look, and in the middle of the road, there's one of those concrete tabletops, and this thing is about that thick. And Wyatt's actually got a picture of me when we went back over there when Doc was with us. He's actually got a picture of me standing on it. I'm not a small guy. I'm 5'9" and about 260 pounds. And he's got a picture of me standing on that thing. And I look like a toddler standing on the edge of an adult eating table. It's huge. It probably weighs over 1,000 pounds. And like I said, it's a chunk of concrete that thick. And it's probably 7 feet long, 3.5, 4 feet wide. It's a big chunk of concrete, and it's just laying in the middle of the road. Don't know how it got there, but the rest of the table is just obliterated. The legs and everything is just like in pieces. So as we get to that point and just a little bit further, we got to looking, and DA got looking at the map, and he's like, we got a long ways to go to make it all the way back around. He said, everybody good to go? And Steve was like, I'm kind of hurting. My leg's hurting. He said, I'll stick it out for you boys if I can. He said, but my leg's kind of hurting. So we get looking at the map, and DA finds the old boat ramp that's there. It's just down the maybe another 30, 40 yards from where we were standing at that time. He says, all right, well, you think you can make it here? And Steve's like, yeah, I can make it there. So he calls Richard on the radio and says, hey, Richard, can you make it? Well, he's asking where he was at, and he told him, he said, there's an old boat ramp. He said, do you know where it's at? He said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. He said, can you meet us there? He's like, yeah, meet us there, or I'll meet you there. So we get there, make it there, and we're still hearing stuff in the woods. We're still hearing grunts, and we're still hearing branches snapping. We're hearing heavy breathing, things like that. Noah's on the parabolic the whole time, and he's it's like it was standing right next to him, as good as he was hearing it with that. And Richard had already said at the end of it, he said, we're going to have to rethink the way we do this. I'm going to take 2 at a time. And he said, that means there's going to be somebody left that's stay just one person for that last trip. Of course, DA being DA was like, well, this is my idea. I'm going to be the last one. I said, the hell you are. Sorry, I hope I can say that. But he said, I said, I'm not going back and facing Miss Annette saying I left you on this island. I said, I know I can't go back. Well, we can't leave Noah because that's her baby. I said, I'm not leaving her husband out there. I said, look, I'm the only one that doesn't have any attachments. I said, my kids know I'm stupid, and they might be upset about it, but they would expect this from me. I said, if anybody's going to stay by themselves, it's going to be me. And me and DA sat back and argued back and forth for like 15, 20 minutes about which one of us was going to stay and be the last one. And as we're doing this argument, Richard's making his trips back and forth, and it comes back to it gets to the point where it's just me, Noah, and DA. We're waiting on that last, or waiting on him to come back over, and we're standing on the boat ramp with the backs of our heels are actually in the water because it was getting pretty. Pardon the pun, it was getting pretty hairy. Because they were getting kind of bold at that point. We could hear them just like up, just in the tree line, just above where the boat ramp was. And when Richard got back that last time, DA said, "Hey, can we just take all three of us?" He said, "It's getting kind of dicey here. It's getting kind of spicy." And Richard said, he looked around. He said, "Yeah." He said, "We might be slow." He said, "But I'd rather be slow out here in the middle of the water and leave one person out here." So we all three loaded up. And when we backed out, the fog had really started drifting in at that point. So he backs out in the channel. And when he backed out in the channel, he had one of those big, high-powered spotlights. He cuts it on. And when he shines it across where we were just standing, there's like 8, 9, 10 sets of eye shine, like way like 8.5 to 10 feet in, differing levels up off the ground. So they were probably about 10, 15 yards from where me, DA, and Noah were standing before he got back over there. So we're pretty sure if one of us had stayed there by ourselves, probably wouldn't have come back. So, and now we can't wait to go back.
Man, see, so when I first heard about that, I heard it from Wyatt. And then I heard it from Richard's point of view. And then I heard it from DA's point of view. And now I hear it from your point of view. And what was the overall sense that you had while you were there? How far did you go up into this old campground?
I'd say we made it from where we put in. We made it about halfway around before it, and we still didn't know at that point that his leg was broke. We just thought he had twisted his knee or something, because he just kept saying, "Oh, my leg's hurting. My leg's hurting." Nobody knew how bad his leg was actually hurt. So we made it about midway. And when we were at the midway point, that's when DA found the boat ramp, and we cut across and went back. Instead of going all the way back up and around the end of the peninsula and then going back around to where we originally put in, we kind of cut across from where we were at and kind of bushwhacked just a little bit and found that boat ramp, and that's where he picked us up. So we went well over halfway, I'd say, start to finish.
And so let me ask you this. So you were on the second wave of people going ashore, correct?
No, me, DA, and Noah were the first three on the ground. We were the first three set of boots on the ground. We were the last three to come off.
So what were you specifically hearing in and around? Because I remember Wyatt said he was hearing this, and Richard said he was seeing stuff.
Yeah, Richard saw a lot more than as far as, because he was out in the water. He was circling. He was circling, so he had a lot better vantage point because he was out away from it. We were like in the middle of the trees and everything.
Yeah.
Like the only time that I saw eye shine was when we were on the boat pulling out, and Richard, and that's what he was seeing the whole time. And anytime he said he would bring the light up, he was seeing eye shine anywhere along that. Basically, what Richard told us is he felt like we were surrounded the entire time, because he said anywhere he brought the light up and shine it on the shore, he was seeing eye shine.
Yeah, that's what he said. It looked like they were trying to funnel you into a certain area.
Yeah. And we've talked about that. If you're hunting on a peninsula, where are you going to push your prey? Mm-hmm. You're going to push it to the water.
Yep.
And that's where they were pushing us. Now, I'm not saying they were pushing us there to, because it didn't fit until we crossed that imaginary line, so to speak, of between the deer and the fish head. It never really felt aggressive, but once we kept on going past that, to me, it felt like it cranked it up a couple notches. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%.
So what I heard, obviously I heard a lot of different sticks snapping or trees snapping, branches snapping, whatever you want. I heard wood breaking. Let's put it that way. I heard things moving through the woods. Always just outside of the beam of a light or just, but I heard all that stuff. I heard a couple of huffs, and I never saw any deer down there. So, and it sounded, if it was a deer, it was a deer that smoked for his entire life. Because it deep huff, yeah, I've been a hunter my entire life. I've heard thousands and thousands of bucks blow. And I'm like, dang it, I missed another one. So I know what that sounds like. And this didn't sound like that.
That still gets to me. And that one wasn't that far back. That's
fairly that was recent. That was last July. That was about a year ago, almost a year ago.
Yeah. So let's talk about another one of your Bigfoot encounters. So you had the one when you were about 8 or 9. What's another one that you had that just really sticks out?
It's hard to stick out much past that one, but I guess the one past the one at Combs Ferry was probably the one with me and Jessica. That was in 23, I think. I went down to the Georgia Bigfoot conference, meet up with Jessica, to hang out with her. And we met up probably around 11 o'clock that morning and went and ate lunch. And she said, well, you want to go up on the mountain? I'm like, yeah, sure. She said, I'll take you up there and show you some of the places that we've researched and things like that. So we went up there. I mean, not really much going on. Didn't find any signs or anything like that. Well, she had to be she was a speaker at that one. So she had to be at the meet and greet that night. And it was supposed to rain that night. But we go to the meet and greet, and there wasn't a whole lot of people at the meet and greet. So we got done a lot earlier than we thought we was going to, and it didn't rain. So on the way back to the hotel, she said, well, you want to go back up into the woods tonight and see if we can see anything? I was like, yeah, that's why we're here. So we go back to the hotel. I went back to my room, changed. She went back to her room, changed. We met back out in the parking lot. Back up the mountain we went to the same place we were at earlier that day. Well, we go up, way, way up the mountain. And I can't say where it's at because that's an actual spot that they still research in. But we were way up on top of a mountain. And we get out and we get to this spot. And, we pulled off the trail to, so, if a car came through, it could still get around her. And then we actually walked probably another 150, 200 yards up another little smaller trail and got up on top of this little bluff. Nice big grassy area. Well, she and I were just sitting there talking, just, because we'd stood out there for, 20, 30 minutes and not really seen or heard anything. Beautiful night, clear. You could see the stars, no noise pollution. It was great. So we were just standing out there talking. I mean, really not even honestly talking about Bigfoot, if I remember right. We were just talking about everything. Crickets and cicadas and everything were going. I mean, it was like we were that far apart having to yell so we could hear each other because it was so loud. And all of a sudden, it was like somebody unplugged the plug of a jukebox at a bar, and everything just went dead quiet. I mean, it was just like nothing. And we're sitting there looking at each other. And she's looking over my shoulder. I'm looking over her shoulder. And I see something move behind her. And I said, something's behind you off in the woods. And she's looking over my shoulder. She goes, oh, there's something behind you too. Because she had seen the same thing over my shoulder that I saw over her shoulder. And I'm like, okay. So we stood there for just a few minutes more, probably maybe 5, just kind of talking real low. And then all of a sudden she turns, snaps her head back down towards her car. She had heard, I never heard it, but she heard something on the other side of her car. She goes, I think there's something else down there on the other side of my car. She goes, maybe we should get back to the car just so we don't get cut off from the car. I said, yeah, I think you're right. So we kind of walked back down the hill, and I get to the car and I turn around to watch her walk the last 2 or 3 yards. And as I'm looking at her, I look up and look back up the hill, and it's kind of silhouetted where you can see the lights kind of shining, starlight and moonlight and maybe ambient light from the city or whatever miles away was illuminating the trees and stuff behind it. Well, as I look up and see right where we were just standing, I see this big shadowy figure on 2 legs walk across right where we were at and go into the wood line. As it gets about midway, I said, turn around, turn around, turn around. She turns around, she sees it just as it's going into the woods. So we both saw a large figure on 2 legs right where we were at walk across from one tree line to the next. But it never felt like anything other than curiosity that night. It was just kind of weird feeling. So we got back in the truck and going back down the mountain. I had the feeling like we were being watched the entire time until our tires touched the pavement at the bottom of that hill off of that mountain. And as soon as we got down there, I was like, okay, it's gone. But I felt like we were being watched the entire way back down that hill. And it was weird. Not scary, just a weird feeling.
Man, I need to go hang out with you guys.
There's a lot of people in our chat that say me and DA are cryptid magnets, because usually when the 2 of us go out, stuff happens. And then you throw Doc in the mix, and
my couple of my life lists or bucket list items, if whatever you want to call them, is I want to cast a print. I've never casted a print. I've seen a few prints, but again, there was back in the 80s, and yeah, I didn't know anything about that type of stuff. So I'd love to cast a print. I'm going to be marking one of those things off by going to this Tennessee Hairy Man Cryptid Conference in August, so I'll be there. And there's a few more things that I'd like to do. But man, when you and Jessica were out, how big was the thing that you guys saw that you guesstimate?
Big. I mean, probably well over 11 feet. And I mean, it was broad too. I mean, it's not like it was a stick figure or a skinny tree. I mean, it was, you could clearly see the conical shaped head and like the broad shoulders. Because as it was walking, it kind of turned down and faced us.
Yeah.
So you could see it walking. Obviously, you would see from the side view of the shoulders, but when it turned, you could just see how, literally, it was probably 4.5, 5 feet across from tip of the shoulder to tip of the shoulder. It was huge.
And it's impressive on how something that big can move the way they move.
Mm-hmm. And I wish that the bad part about it is you couldn't see the stride, because like I said, we were looking up, and the part that was silhouetted or that you could see was only from like probably mid of the midsection up. So I wanted to see that fluid. I mean, you could tell that's what it was doing, like patting, how that walk was. That's how it looked. And I can imagine how the legs were moving, but those were in the shadow, because that was obviously that, between the ground and the bottom of the trees and everything, you wasn't seeing the light coming up over the top of the hill. It wasn't illuminating that part. It was only illuminating from, middle of his midsection up.
Yeah.
He, she, whatever it was. I don't know. As big as it was, I would assume that it was a male.
Well, Robbie, what else would you like to talk about? I mean, I was on your guys' show last night, and before we even got started, you or DA kind of mentioned something that you said you don't know what it is.
You talking about my little UFO sighting?
Yeah, because the way DA said, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I went down to the BFRO event that Mary Ann Zabel had put on, and was teaching a tracking class. So I want to say this was, it was the Friday night that we were down there, because Thursday night before, everybody pretty much went out as one big group and went to the same spot, and we kind of split up into different groups at that spot, but everybody was at one spot. So the next night, Mary Ann was like, I want to kind of go different places and make smaller groups to go to these different places just so there's a better chance. Instead of having 20 people in one spot, we'll have 5 people in one spot or 10 at the most. So she said, you go with me and my husband and my son, stepson, and a few others over here, because this is a good place for tracks. And that's my thing, being a tracker and, you know, all that. I was like, okay, cool. So we get over to the spot, and one group was going to go and sit down by the river and just kind of do like maybe some call blasting type stuff. And me, Mary Ann, her husband's and stepson, and a couple others, we're just going to go walk and maybe try to get along the creek bed and just some places like that. Just see if we can see some tracks, maybe see if we see some eye shine, something like that. Well, we get over and we're looking around, and it's real rocky. There's not a whole lot of track traps, not a whole lot of places that we could see any track, because it's nighttime too. So there was a kid with us. I say kid, he was in his 20s. So obviously, you know, being our age, that's not anything derogatory. It's just he was a young guy. Well, he was really into UFOs. That was his thing. But he came because he wanted to know more about Bigfoot. So he had all his UFO stuff, and we kind of were like, well, there's a big flat area up there, a little grassy area. Maybe we can get up there with the FLIR and look out. Maybe we'll see something out there in that field. So we kind of get up and start walking around looking, and I'm looking down the ground. Well, Mary Ann's husband is he's kind of the skeptic of the group. And he starts looking out in the distance. He says, hey, y'all want to see a funny light? And so everybody's like, sure. So we go up there, and he says, look out there. And when I looked out at it, I thought, okay, that's about a mile away. Then Mary Ann was like, nah, that ain't but a couple 100 yards away. And then we all started looking at it, and everybody's like, nah, I believe that's about a mile away. Because it was just, like I said, you could see the outline of the mountain, hill, whatever it was, way behind it. But it was just a white light. It was not red. It was not green. And sometimes it would just go straight. Sometimes it would go up. Sometimes it would go down. Sometimes it looked like a freaking flat or a heart monitor rated, because it'd go like this and then go here and it'd go up and down, and then it'd circle and it would do flips, and it was just doing all kinds of stuff. Well, the other guys that were down there with the FLIR and all that kind of stuff, Mary Ann said, somebody needs to go down there and get them, because they want to see this. Plus, John's got all the cool equipment that we need to kind of check this thing out. Well, the kid that had all the UFO stuff, he's got some kind of little radio, and he said it's supposed to go from like 200 megahertz to 900 megahertz and scans all frequencies in between, you know, just constantly. He said it picks up airplane, helicopter, it picks up law enforcement, EMS, all these kind of radios. Well, that thing got stuck, and it would only go from 200 to 400 and back to 200, and it would just rotate in those bands, but not picking up anything. There was a plane that flew over before we saw that light, and then we didn't see any more aircraft at all. And like I said, there was no red or green on this. It was just solid white. So I go down and get them, and they come back up. Well, John had a FLIR, and he looks at it, and he's like, there's no heat signature on it. So that obviously took a drone out of the equation, but drones don't move that fast and that agile either. They're, you know, kind of doing those rollovers and all this kind of stuff. And then sometimes it would just kind of stop and almost hover, and then it would just take off again in like either a diagonal direction. I mean, it was just, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life. I have no explanation for what it was. It completely blew my mind. We sat there for almost 3 hours watching this thing, and it was constantly doing stuff like that for like that whole time. And I have zero explanation for what it was.
Man, And again, you're describing the movements, and immediately, and you pretty much ruled it out. But immediately, what popped in my head was a drone. But if you remember, not too long ago, people were seeing all these drones in the air, and people were taking video of them, and what they have in them, they had flashing red lights, flashing green lights, and you just came right out and said that they didn't have any of those lights. It just a white light.
Yeah, it was solid the whole time. It was not a flashing light either. It was just because the very first thing out of my mind when I first saw it, I'm thinking somebody with a flashlight doing it. But you sit there and watch it for 2-3 minutes, you automatically know, because it would go literally like the distance of 2 football fields. It would go from here all the way over here in like seconds. And even if that was somebody with a flashlight, that is a long way for a. I mean, it would have to be a powerful beam of a flashlight to do that, but you would still see the trail. You might see the spot like of the the head of the beam, but you're going to see the trail. This was just that little circle, and I say little because it was so far away. I mean, it could have been size of a Chevy pickup for all I know. I mean, it was just
that's incredible. Well, I'll tell you right now, you didn't disappoint. I mean, with your first one, and then reliving the ones when you went out to the lake with DA and Wyatt and Richard and the rest of the crew. I mean, and now this UFO, you don't know. But so is there anything that you would like to plug?
Well, obviously we've already talked about DA's books, so go check DA's books out. He's got 30 plus books in print. Go check my books out. If anybody that is one of your subscribers likes DA's books, they're probably gonna like mine there's probably some surprises coming with both of our books. We're working on some things that is probably gonna make some people happy and blow some people's minds. We've been trying to figure out how to do it since I actually got started, and I think we've come up with a pretty good way to do it. So there's this third book that I'm working on right now. There's gonna be a lot of revelations and there's gonna be some questions answered, but it's gonna leave a lot more questions.
So people looking for yours and DA's books, where can they find them?
You can find both of us on Amazon. You can find his daroberts.net. You can find mine on Amazon under Robby Raines or Robby Raines Books, however you want to search it, either one of those. My two right now that I have is the Shadow Walker series. The first book is Silver Star, and the second book is The Creature Escape Horse Swamp, kind of based on the Lizard Man Escape Horse Swamp from here in South Carolina.
Okay.
And the first one takes place here in Pickens County where I live. Uses a lot of local stuff, which there again, it's kind of stuff I took from DA. Write about what you know. The third book takes place in Gatlinburg, and it's called right now, unless I change it, it's called Shadow Walkers Book 3, Terror of the Wampus Cat. I like to throw a lot of Native American lore in there because I've got Cherokee in me, and I like a lot of their myths. And basically, the first book was based on the Cherokee proverb of the two wolves. You ever heard that one?
Yeah.
Everybody's got two wolves in them, one good, one evil. Which wolf wins, or which wolf dies, or which one wolf lives? The one you feed the most. That's kind of the whole crux of that entire book. It's a werewolf story, but it's steeped in all that. And for my first book, I was and I'm my own worst critic about stuff. I think I did pretty decent on that, so we'll give it a check.
That's awesome. And how often do you and DA go live on your guys' podcast?
We're live every Wednesday and Saturday nights, and it is 8 p.m. Central, which I believe that's
9 p.m.
8 p.m.
Eastern.
9 p.m. Eastern. Sorry.
Yep.
Sometimes I get being those two different time zones things. So 9 Eastern, 8 Central. We're thinking or trying to figure out how to go back and do the Sunday night show again, because we used to do the campfire stories, or as we affectionately began to call it, the Redneck Reading Association.
Nice.
We would read our books, read so many chapters a night. But yeah, it got to be that's a lot, doing three live shows a week. So
yeah,
that may still be coming back, but we got to do some rethinking on that. But definitely every Wednesday and Saturday night. We've got on the 28th of this month, we've got Tressa and Jenna from the Monster Lounge are going to be on. I think that's going to be on a Saturday.
Okay.
We just had you on Wednesday night. We just had Wayne Tothrow and Tiffany Doran on a couple nights ago. I had Heath Stalk up on a couple weeks ago. Probably going to get we just talked about getting Doug Highcheck back on. He's always a good. Might try to get MK Davis back on in the next little bit too. He's always been a good one to be on the show.
Yeah, that's one person I'd like to get a hold of as well, is MK Davis.
Yeah, MK's a good guy.
I don't know if you know this, but Doug lives like 20 minutes from me.
I think you said something about
him.
But
he's such a cool guy.
Yep.
He is such a cool guy.
He's a fountain of knowledge, that's for sure. And we still got to reschedule a show with Fred Roll, because he was going to be on a couple months ago, and he had a health scare with his dad. So we got to get him back on. Love Fred. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I remember I reached out to him early on. His episode is number 10 on mine. And he's evolved from the way he does his show now, from when he was on episode 10 to what he's done now. And hopefully I'd like to maybe have him on for my 100th show. But yeah, I love Fred, Fred Roll. He is just a plethora of knowledge and how he tells the stories. It's just fantastic. So, but yeah, man. So, hey, if you could hang out in the lobby a little bit, I got a couple questions to ask you, and we'll go from there.
All
right, guys. Say goodnight to Robbie. Rob, thanks so much. I appreciate you, buddy. And I'll be with you in 1 second.
All right.
So, you guys, that's our show for tonight. I'm going to tell you right now, I told you, Robby Raines, great guy. And I'm telling you, I didn't know anything about his Bigfoot encounter when he was little. And just the fact that here he is, 8 or 9 years old, he's just looking out that door and he sees this massive creature looking in, kind of swaying back and forth. I don't know about you. That one absolutely terrified me. I'm sure it terrified him. But you guys, that just goes to show that these things really have no boundaries. They'll do what they want when they want. They'll come and go as they please. What was its intentions? We'll never know. But like I've said before, in the realm of the cryptids, probability is great. The realm of probability is so vast that anything could potentially happen. So remember, when you guys go out investigating, hiking, camping, whatever you're doing, be safe out there. Be safe. Let people know where you're going to be. If you have a route planned, let someone know what that route is. Make sure you're prepared when you're out there, mentally, physically. Have rations with you. Have something if you have to stay overnight because of an emergency, weather related or whatnot. Make sure you're able to be safe while you're out and about. So until next time, you guys, as my buddy Josh always says from Mysteries Unknown, stay prayed up. And as I always like to say, remember, guys, a legend begins with a sighting. All right, you guys, you have a wonderful night. Thank you so much. tomorrow night, 8:30 Central Standard Time, we are doing a live stream. So it happens every Saturday night. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good night. I'll talk to you again.
I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?